Now, before I give you a better definition of culture, I want you to have a quick thought experiment. I'm going to list a few words, and I want you to picture them. Picture the scenario on your mind. And I'm going to call someone to describe what you picture on your mind. So let's picture scenarios for the following. First, a hearty welcome. Second, a cordial reception. And third, a freshman convocation. Now, picture those things on your mind. Number one, who are the people giving it? What are they wearing? What are they drinking, or whether they are drinking at all? And what expressions are on their faces? And what is the environment like? Right? Start with the first, a hearty welcome. So, Megan, what do you picture on your mind to describe hearty welcome?
I picture like a family reunion, and maybe some people had traveled, driven a while, or gone on a few flights, and they're embracing them and welcoming them into their home, and everyone's dressed pretty casually, maybe getting ready to have happy hour, looking very excited, and maybe it's after a year of pandemic and they haven't seen each other for a while.
Do they drink?
Yes.
Or talk? Okay. Do they talk loudly or quietly?
Loudly.
Loudly. Do they drink? What do they drink?
Alcohol and also sodas and
do they drink classy wines or beer? Which one's more popular?
Beer and like bottom shelf wine, nothing classy.
All right. And Joey, what do you picture on your mind for a hearty welcome?
Kind of similar. I kind of picture family mostly.
I
kind of
family, like close friends, so very close people, right? Very casual.
Yeah, I kind of picture like how movies describe where you walk in the door and there's just everybody right there in the threshold, or the can't even think of the word, but you walk right in and there's just all these people and they're drinking wine and they're dressed all fancy and they're welcoming you, like, here he is, That's how I always kind of picture.
Great. All right. So sounds very consistent. Second picture, a cordial reception. It should be a cordial reception because that's actually French. So what do you picture in your mind? Let me call Brenna. What do you picture in your mind for a cordial reception?
So, like the people giving are usually some sort of like a businessman or business people, wearing suits, or some of them with a jacket, women in dresses, drinking more expensive wine and beer, like smiling whenever they're meeting people that they haven't seen for a while, and just kind of in like an office building.
Okay, great. So it sounds like more formal. It's more formal, more business correct, right? Not correct. Family members. I actually called a Brenna, but it looks like Brenna's mic is not working.
Oh, sorry.
That's fine. Yeah, but she's probably agrees with you. It's like,
yeah, hopefully.
So Lauren, what do you picture in your mind for a cordial reception?
Yeah, I agree with Brennan. I think like when I think of the hearty welcome, I think of like really exciting, but in terms of cordial, I just think maybe like more low key, not as intense, more laid back kind of.
And what do people wear in a cordial reception? Is that lumberjacks or
I think
slippers?
Like casual, like jeans and a sweater.
But probably business casual, not too casual, right? Definitely not in pajamas. That for hearty welcome during pandemic, you could wear pajamas to do a hearty welcome. Right? Finally, a freshman convocation. Let me ask Melanie, what do you picture for a freshman convocation? Will there be a lot more people, and what do they wear? What is on your picture?
So a bunch of confused young people wandering around in t-shirts and shorts, or t-shirts and jeans. maybe with a bottle of water with the university logo.
Do they drink alcohols?
Doubtful, because they'd be underage and the university be liable.
John here, what do you think? What was your experience for freshman convocation? What did you wear?
When I was there, I remember wearing, first of all, I remember being very afraid because I didn't know what it would be like. But I remember wearing like a large UNC Charlotte like t-shirt and I think a pair of jeans and just like sneakers to be walking around in. Nothing like super formal, just something that I would feel comfortable in. But that's pretty much all I could remember. Just wearing a t-shirt, some jeans, and like so a pair of sneakers to.
And were you offered any alcohols, wines, or beer, or anything?
No, but I'm pretty sure after hours when nobody was looking around, there were probably some of us that were trying to get.
So it's you could drink before, after, right? But not during the
not
convocation.
during, definitely not
during convocation. Okay, so let me show you the pictures on my mind, which should be very consistent with what you picture on your mind. So this is on my mind for. Now, guess which one this is. Should that be a convocation or cordial reception or hearty welcome? So which one should this be?
Hearty welcome.
Hearty welcome, right? Because those are earthly people in a earthly family resident, wearing very casual lumberjack shirts and jeans, like hugging and talking loudly. Probably some music, and they drinking beer. It's a very exciting and home welcoming social gathering with good friends and family members. That's on my mind. This is what on my mind for a cordial reception. It's relatively classy and fine, dressing people. They talk elegantly. It's more of a business casual social event. Definitely not at home. It's probably in a high-end bar or a ballroom. Many people are wearing blazers and skirts. They're drinking wine and caviar. It's more formal and business-oriented social gathering. This is what's on my mind for a freshman convocation. Probably things are changing, but this is the typical one of freshman convocation, with a lot of people, the whole first grade of the university. It's formal, it's ritual. There will usually be keynote speakers giving big topic talks to everyone. It's a ceremony, it's ceremonial, it's sacred. Definitely cannot offer alcohols or drink during the convocation. You could drink after as a celebration or drink before it. And the reason why, so those three are very similar clauses, right? Similar expressions, but we all have these historically rooted images about them. And no matter where you ask, as long as they have studied English, have studied or lived in English-speaking environment for a while, they should have more or less the same consistent perceptions about the social background attached to those three different classes. The reason for that is those three words originated from different cultural groups in history, and they were used by different social, at the time, classes, social classes from different ethnic and social groups in history. Although they have been mingled together, merged together into modern English, only the first, a hearty welcome, was originally English. And by English, I mean Old English spoken by the Anglo-Saxon peasants in the British Island. Now, during the 11th and 14th century, the Normans conquered the large part of Europe, including the English island. So they did not want to emulate the lifestyle of what they perceive as uneducated and the low-class locals, which are the real English-speaking people, the old English-speaking peasants, Anglo-Saxons. They were trying to emulate the high-class lifestyle of the French-speaking aristocracy. So they imported the French vocabularies into English whenever they were in the high-class aristocratic style social events, like a cordial reception, like a hard-class, boring social gathering, and so on. So cordial reception was merged from French, imported from French into English at the time. Now, but both French and Old English were speaking languages. Most people do not write anything formal, definitely not academic at the time in either English or French. So Isaac Newton wrote most of his works, academic works, in Latin, because Latin was the only official academic scholarly language at the time. So a lot of the expressions to explain academic, ritual, ceremonial works were in Latin from Roman languages. So, and freshman and convocation is neither English nor French, it's Latin. And all those words used by different social classes at the time gradually were merged together into the same vocabulary, into modern English, and used as everyday expressions. But because we learn those words in their contexts, either in textbooks or in our readings or in Disney movies or so on, we kind of attach the history of those words into the meanings. We attach the historical meanings of those words into the use of them. And that shared meaning from history is culture. Now, let me give you a more formal definition. So culture is the collection. Now, which do you see both my slides and your video panel, or only the slides?
Only the slides.
Only slides. Okay, let me make sure you are seeing the right screen. Let me share one more time. All right, great. Just make sure I'm not blocking your view. Okay, culture is a collection of values. That's the formal definition. Culture is the collection of values, beliefs, behaviors, customs, and attitudes that distinguish one society from another. As long as it's, because it covers so many different things, but as long as it's a part of culture, it should have four properties, four characteristics. It should reflect learned behavior. So it's not inborn, it's not a biological, it's not a genetically inherited. Personality can be said to be largely genetically or partially genetically inherited. Temperament, for example, could be genetically inherited, but culture is not. It could be born as a Chinese, but learned as an American. It could be born as Caucasian, but learned as a Latino. So that's learned, it's not inborn. So culture reflects learned behavior that is transmitted from one member of a society to another. Some elements of cultures are transmitted intergenerationally, such as when parents teach their children table manners. Other elements could be transmitted intragenerationally, as when seniors educate incoming freshmen about the school's traditions. The elements of culture are interrelated. What I mean by that is, let me give you one example. The Japanese group-oriented hierarchical society, that's a social structure, stresses harmony and loyalty, which historically translated into many workplace behaviors, such as lifetime employment with the same employer and the minimum job switching between jobs. Because culture is a learned behavior, it is adaptive. Because whenever you learn, you also learn the current context of the culture as a tool, and you want to maximize the value of culture as a tool, such as language or meaning or vocabulary or customs and so on. So culture changes in response to the external forces at the time when it's learned that may affect the society. Culture is a very important one. I think it's culture is a shared. It's not individual value. It's not a personality. It's not individual preferences. It's shared by members of the society and indeed defines the membership in the society. Individuals who share a society are members of that society, and those who do not are outside the boundaries of the society. Now, cultures may include many things. We tend to include 5 group of elements into the scope of culture, including social structure, such as how families are structured, how relationships are defined with friends, with strangers, with colleagues, and language, the language you speak, the verbal language, written language, the communications, which very often are nonverbal, the gestures, body languages. Actually, 70% or 80% of the time, people communicate meanings through nonverbal means, especially in the in-person environment. Now we kind of lose that. We kind of lose that, the most important part of communications, of understanding each other. And 70% or more is through nonverbal means. It's not I talk and you listen. It's a lot of interactions through facial expressions, body languages, the tones, and so on. And religion, of course, is part of culture. It's a formal ritual code of conduct that define a society's behaviors and beliefs, and non-religious values and attitudes. Those are more informal, but they play similar roles as religions. They constrain people, they limit people through norms in terms of what people can do or people cannot do in certain situations. The most important element of culture, I would argue, is language. If you understand language very well, you understand the majority of the culture differences. And even you don't, you can use language as a tool for you to learn the other elements of language. So I would argue a language is a primary delineator of cultural groups because it is an important means by which a society's members communicate with each other. A language organizes the way members of a society think about the world, and the examples I gave you in the beginning of the session were some of the examples. Language can filter observations and perceptions and thus affect unpredictably the messages that are sent when two individuals try to communicate. In addition to shaping one's perceptions of the world, language also provides important clues about the cultural values of the society. The presence of, so how do we know whether one country, one society is more diverse than the others? We usually use the presence of multiple language groups as an important signal about the diversity of a country's population, and the multiplicity of languages or multilingualism would often suggest that there may also be differences in people's income, cultural values, educational achievement, and many other social economic outcomes within the society. Now, this picture shows the relative size of popularity or population speaking each of the main global languages. As you can see, the most popular language people speak is Chinese. That's because China is has the largest population, and it's a relatively culturally, linguistically homogeneous society, unlike India. So India has more or less the same population, but there's so many different languages within India, so many different ethnicities and cultures and beliefs. It's more fragmented, more segmented into different language elements. But China has a large number of ethnic minorities. It's just 99% of people Chinese are like me. They're the majority Han people, Eastern Asian, Mongoloid people, and some of the news you watch these days about the Uyghurs or Tibetans. So those are some of the major ethnic minorities in China, and they speak completely different languages, and ethnically they're different groups. So Tibetans are closer to the Indians, Nepalis, and the Uyghurs are actually Turkish, but it is a long list of ethnic minorities in China. So that's something interesting many people don't realize. Following Chinese, some of the other most populous languages include Spanish, probably more populous or equally populous as English, then Portuguese, Arabic group of languages, Hindi, mostly spoken in India, Bengali in India, Tamil in southern India, Japanese because of its large population in Japan, Italian, French, Turkish, Korean, and so on. So if you are lucky to speak Chinese, English, and Spanish, you have no problems traveling to almost any countries in the world. And because that would capture more than half of the world population. Now, for most Americans, the difficulty is not about understanding a different language, because English is already the world language. Almost everyone speaks English, especially in younger generations nowadays. So the cultural barrier related to language is no longer just about language itself. It's about the nuances that within English heterogeneities. Now, one is accent. Here's one joke, because I used to have, so one of my professors when I was doing my PhD was from New Zealand, and we were sometimes joking around about this to him, because in New Zealandish English, there's no such thing called a day. It's not a Monday, Tuesday, Friday, today, yesterday. It sounds die. So there's a joke. The American general shouted at the young soldier from New Zealand, "Did you come here to die?" And his response was, "No, sir, I came here is to die. I came here is to die," because that's how day was pronunciated in New Zealand. And we made a lot of jokes about this when we were in school. When I was doing my PhD, it was a lot of fun. And people from New Zealand do make this accent. Now, accent is something easy to be corrected, right? So people lived for a long time in America or in UK. They kind of the accent is kind of homogenized into the locals. Now, whenever you listen to Elon Musk's talks, you rarely realize he's South African. So he's speaking you rarely realize the accent, the South African accent from Elon Musk, because he's been living this for a long time. What's really more important when in an English-speaking but cross-cultural environment is the different meanings behind the same vocabularies. Now, here's one example, and it pretty much reflects the cultural values. When we try to comment someone's work, if we follow an objective distribution, when we say something's pretty good, and that's what really mean that where something pretty good, it's average or below, above average, or even slightly below average, it's pretty good. When we say something is okay, it's probably below pretty good. It's in the 30th or 25th percentile, and it's not good. We would say it's junk. It's terrible. When we say good, that's in the upper 75th percentile or so. And when we say something is awesome, it's really that's on the extreme. That's 90th percentile, highly commendable work. When Americans use the same thing, say the same thing, it could mean something totally different, because the meaning, the commendability in America is positively skewed. People tend to be nicer. They tend to be more optimistic when they comment on someone's work. When they say this is awesome, that's typical comment most people receive about their work. It could mean somewhere between pretty good in an objective fashion to perfect. When Americans say pretty good, it's usually not so good. It's below average. It's or borderline with a terrible. And when they say it's a good start, that means you really need some work. Right? You need some work. So I tend to be commenting people's works following the American style. So that means you may want to go back to see my comments to a bi-weekly weeks and see if I said anything like it's a good start. That usually is a warning sign for your work. If I say it's pretty good, it's excellent, I really mean that. It's excellent. So I rarely use the word excellent. If you have the word excellent in my comments, congratulations, you really did a good job. But when Eastern Europeans, such as Russians, comment someone's work, they tend to be meaner. They tend to be more negatively skewed. If the most popular answer you get from them would be, what is this garbage? Well, it won't be this language, but it's usually more negative. I don't like it, or you need to fix something. So what is this garbage could mean anywhere between pretty good to really garbage. And if they say I don't like it, it could mean good. And when they say even so, that you should take that as a compliment. So that's language. Now, unless you are, so raise your hands if you are multilingual. So you speak multiple languages. Raise your hands. Okay, so only 5 people are multilingual. So if you're not multilingual, English is only your only language you have mastered, you are fluent in, that's fine. You don't have to learn different languages to be able to estimate the cultural differences across societies. One shortcut for someone to roughly estimate the cultural differences across countries, across people, is to look at the linguistic distance. So the linguistic distance can be measured as the number of branches you need to reach the common ancestor of 2 languages. So you can measure the cultural, you can estimate roughly the cultural differences as the distance, number of branches you need between 2 languages. So English is belongs to the big linguistic branch called Indo-European, and Chinese is in a totally different branch, different genealogy called Sino-Tibetan. Those are the 2 major linguistic genealogies. Within Indo-European, English is a part of the Western Germanic language branch. What that means is sometimes, and actually very often, Americans believe their cultures are closer to the Latinos, to the Southern Americans speaking Spanish, Portuguese, and so on, whereas culturally, Americans are closer to the Germans or Germanic languages, German-speaking languages, including some of the Dutch, and so on. And that is because Old English was derived from Old German, and most of the Latin American languages are in a totally different branch called the Romance. So this is one tree, one version of the linguistic trees of all the members in Indo-European. It shows the migration of early Europeans out of Europe, and many moved to the south through Iran, all the way to India. So culturally, actually, Indians are not Asians. So that's a very interesting thing. So right now, this anti-Asian hate movement, and there's really not one culture. There's really not one ethnic group. There's so many different things. I'm not very active in this whole anti-Asian movement and the anti-Asian hatred movement, because it's really hard to define one group of people as Asians. So Indians could be Asians, Malaysians, Chinese could be Asians, but linguistically and culturally, Indians are really Indo-Europeans, because that's the language they speak, that's their genes. So because language was carried over by physical migration of people. So genetically, Indians, most Indians, except Tamils, southern part of India, are Indo-Europeans. So it's really, there's no such a thing called Asian in terms of culture. So that's language as the most important culture delineator, in my view. So we are running a bit late, but let me make a summary. So culture is so vast. The whole world could be think of as a spectrum of cultures between two ends, two extremes. On the one end is the American extreme. So Americans, I mean, typical Americans, probably none of you is a typical American, but the typical Americans, like fifth generation Americans, would be on the one extreme with very, very high individualism and low power distance. That's one extreme of the world. The other extreme is the Eastern Asians, especially in the Confucius territory, Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, Singaporeans, and so on, with very high collectivism, very high power distance. Now, the reason for that is Americans are the individualism poster child for two reasons. One is the majority of Americans are immigrants. 12% are first generation off the boat immigrants, like myself, first generation immigrants. And another 12% are children of immigrants, like my daughter, and many of friends I know. So the first and second generation immigrants have taken up 1/4 of the country. That's very, very unique. Very few countries in the world. Now we take it for granted. So everyone is from somewhere within the last few generations, but this is very unusual. This is highly unusual. The other country I can think of is Canada. Very few. Australia could be the third. So only those three countries are immigrant countries. And everybody in this country, except the less than 1% pure Native Americans, are descendants from people who immigrated within the last 500 years. If we go back by 7, 8 generations, everyone was an immigrant, was moved voluntarily or involuntarily, I would say. I would add that into the country. Now, so who are the immigrants? So the immigrants, especially the voluntary immigrants, right? I try to use the politically correct words. Voluntary immigrants into the country were cranks, malcontents, restless, radical, black sheep, itchy, non-conventional people. They were striving so strongly to be free, yelling to be rich, yelling to be out of their boring, repressive little hamlet, which is the British Empire, or any other empirical repressive regimes in Europe. And this was coupled with extreme optimism that enabled the early settlers to cross across the ocean into the New World. So that's a very special, very exceptional route of population across the world. So those are so the root of the country is highly optimistic, highly driven for freedom, highly driven for individual space. That formed the first extreme of the world in the spectrum of culture. The next extreme of the culture is the Eastern Asians. They have very high collectivism, very group oriented, and they feel a lot more of authority. And for those of you who are working with the Chinese, you could kind of fear that the cultures are very different. They tend to be less proactive. It takes them longer to get out of the shell, to express themselves, to share their own ideas. And that's the other extreme. And it has to do with what they eat. They eat rice. Now, this sounds very strange, but that's the reason. That is the historical reason. Before I explain that, any of you can think of why rice is the reason. It's one big reason for the high collectivism in East Asian cultures. Any ideas?
Because it's a universal constant in almost every meal?
No.
Is it very difficult to harvest? And so you have to work as a team?
It's very difficult to domesticate. And the Chinese were the first group of people in history who had domesticated rice back to roughly 10,000 years ago. And the reason is not that other countries have not tried, because it's so difficult. And what I mean by difficult is it takes massive amount of communal and organized work with a centralized authority to do. Usually in the US, in most other countries, the primary food is wheat or corn. It takes probably just 3 or 5 families at most to grow. You have a little farm and you can grow it. And it doesn't take more than 5 families. Definitely doesn't take the whole village or whole town. But for domesticating rice, it takes the entire village, sometimes multiple villages, under a strong ruling of authority to succeed. Because it's very difficult to grow and harvest rice. Collective labor is first needed to transform the entire ecosystem to grow it. They need to people need to raise mountains after mountains to prepare the land and to fertilize the land for rice. And they need to build and maintain irrigation systems, because there's no natural irrigation system to raise the mountains. They need to build large scale irrigation systems for controlled flooding. And as a consequence of that, usually for any societies that have succeeded in growing rice and survived over the last 10,000 years are the ones who have developed very strong centralized authority for dividing water fairly at a larger scale. For example, one of the largest irrigation system in ancient China, which was built 2,000 years ago, could irrigate more than 5,000 square meters of rice farms. Now, as a consequence of that, over the last 10,000 years, families, children, members of societies were taught this collective communal work as the norm. And it's what no one is living in such rural or elementary or rudimentary communal work anymore, but the culture was carried over to the children. So, but there's a missing link, right? So all those two reasons were historical. So they happened in history. So how could cultures be so, but we still feel the cultural differences today between the two extremes. So what explains why people even today are still behaving consistent with the extremes of the historical cultures? The reason for that is the history is carried over largely through the ways in which parents rear they are pre-verbal children. Now, in the Western societies, in American definitely, when kids reach the age of 1 or 2, when they start babbling, talking, learning words, parents tend to focus on objects as the primary initial words for children to learn. Now, if you remember what were the initial words you learned, in the US, they probably colors, shapes, names of animals, names of buildings. Those are separable, independent objects. So, and for pre-verbal children, learning is a lot about memorizing, associating pictures with the sounds and symbols. So they are primed with separate objects, and then after they are primed with objects, they learn the relationships with those objects. So they would they would learn what's the relationship between red and blue, what's the relationship between cat and people, what's the relationship between firefighters and fire engine and fire, because they tend to think about objects independent of context first, and then add context into it secondary. But in most East Asian cultures, pre-verbal children were taught verbs first before nouns. So they were taught about stand up, cross over, smile to me, touch my hand first before they were taught objects, things, and nouns. So they are primed with verbs, with interactions between a context and a thing, then associate things into the context. Now, this is so far very stereotypical, and in both societies, there's a normal distribution, because there are American kids who were taught by parents who think like Easterners, and there are Chinese who were raised by parents who think more like Westerners. Now, we could have a little test and see whether you are thinking more like a Westerner. You're thinking more towards the Western stream, individualism, out of context, independence, or thinking more like an Easterner, context first, group level, the overall picture. So I'm going to show you several pictures, and I want you to do some clicks to show your own views that will reveal whether you are thinking more like an Easterner or Westerner. So let's go to my pauleverywhere.com. So remember this link, paulev.com/Victor Z Chen, and look at this picture. Click the places where your eyes are located, your views are located. All right, looks like everyone is focused on the tiger, one on the grass. Now let me again call someone. Zane, can you briefly describe this picture? So in one sentence, what is this picture about?
A tiger going after prey, possibly.
It's a tiger somewhere, right? Let me call Crystal. Can you briefly describe this picture in one sentence?
I'm seeing the tiger is coming out of the woods.
Come out of the wood. Okay. So this is so interesting. Let me ask another person. Abdu, what do you see in this picture? How do you describe this picture to someone?
A tiger is waiting for prey from the bush.
From the bush. All right. So this is so interesting. Whenever American kids were asked to describe this picture, they would say it's a tiger. It's a picture of a tiger. It's a tiger in the woods or tiger from the jungle. Whenever the East Asian kids were asked to describe this picture, most of the time they would say it's a jungle, it's a woods. and there happens to be a tiger in it. Because they think about the context first. They think about it overall, because tiger is really a tiny part of the picture, right? It's not even the focal point. Well, in this picture, the focal point. But the Eastern Asians, they tend to describe overall what this overall picture is, and then focus on the detail. And the Western thinkers tend to go directly to the most important part of this. And the most important part of this picture is indeed tiger. So it looks like by the first question, most of the people think more towards the end of Americans on the spectrum. Second one, now don't click anything yet. The question is, what number one, I want to confirm everyone sees a blue ball, right? Everyone sees a blue ball, and it's a shining blue ball. Now the question is, so is this ball shining in blue by itself, or it's actually a white ball, and there's some blue light shining on it? So the blueness, the blue is reflecting the color of the light from the outside. If you think the ball is shining in blue by itself, click the ball. If you think the light is from an outside source, click the outside source anywhere in the dark. All right, so if you think the ball is blue by itself, you are on the American extreme. So you are very good at separating the subject from its context. It's independent. But you believe, well, it's not entirely blue, right? Some part it looks very white. So it's reflecting the external source of light in blue. That you are thinking, the farther from this, the farther you are thinking towards the easterner end of the spectrum. We already see some inconsistencies in your answers. That means not everyone is perfectly American, not everyone is perfectly Easterner on this spectrum. Most people are in the middle somewhere. Now the next picture, don't click anything yet until I ask you to do so. So there are two pictures right here, right? Look at player number 2. So pictures were taken after the game with another team, and player 2 is actually the same. It's a smiling, and he doesn't see anybody from his team. The question for you is, does he look the same happy to you? If you think he is same happy to you, click the first one. If you think he is happier in the second, click the second. All right? Again, if you think he is same happy, click same, click A. If you think he is happier in the second, click B. All right, interesting. So if you think he is not the same happy, you are taking into account of the background, of the context. So maybe they lost the game, right? So the teammates were not happy. How could this person be happy? He happens to be standing in the center for the picture, so he pretends to be happy. If you think he's the same happy, you focus on the person himself. You are separating the person, the emotion, the sentiment from the context. If you link the context to it, you think more, you think closer to the Easterner end of the spectrum. If you separate the context, you think he's the same happy, you think more like a Westerner. Okay? So the classes looks like quite a split in terms of the ways of thinking. Now, next, 3 things: monkey, a panda, and bananas. Click any area between the 2 that you think should go together. Aha, we have. So first, no one is clicking the area between panda and bananas. So everyone is normal. Perfect. Now, 2 people clicked the area between monkey and the panda. So I don't see the names. So can you recognize yourself? And
Yeah.
so why do you click those 2?
They're both mammals, I guess. I guess when I think that the 2 things that go together are the 2 that are most alike, and they're both mammals.
They're both mammals. They're both animals. You can find them both in a zoo, right? Mm-hmm. So if you link monkey and panda together, you are separating the properties of things without considering their interactions, because you will never see pandas and monkeys interacting in the same room, right? In the same place in the zoo. So you are classifying things based on the properties. That's closer to the Westerner thinking. Focus on the object itself without thinking about interactions. If you link monkeys and bananas together, you prioritize the interactions between things, because you want to classify them into the same category. They don't belong to the same category, but they interact. Monkeys eat bananas, right? So you are thinking more towards the Easterner thinking. So overall, I think the point of what I'm trying to make here is, in this class, we don't have extreme Americans or extreme Easterners, and most people are somewhere in between, and sometimes mixed between 2 different cultures. All right, this is the last picture. Let me close this. So what does this all have to do with international business? We're a bit over schedule, but to give you a very simple example, the culture differences in terms of the Westerner versus Easterner ways of thinking. One is more context-based, more group level, overall picture. One is more focused, object based. These ways of thinking can help companies customize the design of their products to meet local users' preferences. So there's one example, which is search engine products, Google versus Baidu, which is the Chinese version of Google in China. So in one study in 2007, users were asked to, so the researchers tracked the eye traffic, focus on the first page of their search result. And in the US, users would focus on the upper left, because they know the first one is going to be the most relevant, and that's it, and exit. Once they click that, it exits, and the experiment is stopped. When Chinese users use Google, it's the same product, same search algorithm. Although they know and they learned that the first one or the first 2 or 3 would be the most relevant, they would also take a bigger picture. They would also look at other parts of the page, 4th, 5th, or even the entire picture before they exit. When they use the Chinese products, Baidu, the relevant results are not always the first. They are spread out on the entire page. And those are the majority of the Chinese in China who are using the search engine products. And they would look at the entire picture before they exit, because they want to take a look at a big picture and see maybe something's missing in their search. Maybe there should be some related to context or keywords they should use for the next round of search. And truth being told, Google eventually lost a lot of money and to Baidu because the products were not customized to meet Chinese users' behaviors, because they try to look at the whole picture. They want the whole first picture to be relevant, and not relevant in terms of the most precise catch of the keywords, but things that are related to what they search. So this is one example how to use the different ways of thinking to design and customize the products. All right, so that's all for the lecture. There is a small practice in the slides, but we are running out of time. I want to, I want you to maybe do some small practice by yourself after the class if you're interested. It shows some difficulties of a few regional level managers meeting together for the first cross-cultural team. Now, may I suggest we skip any break and we can finish early by 7. And I want the rest of the 30 minutes to have a discussion with all the teams about your work. And each team could have, so we have 6 teams, each team could have 5 minutes to share with us what you have done. So what's the purpose of your last week, what you have done, what you have learned, and what are you going to learn next, and how you are going to do that, right? So which team wants to go first?
I can go first for Pro-Human Technologies 2, I think.
Right, okay.
Okay, I can start. So the last week has been focused on 3 main areas for us. So the first is continuing to collaborate with our teammates in China. We still have only talked to 2 of the 3 teammates that we have in China. One we still haven't heard back from, but we've talked to the second one over email, but we haven't talked to them in person. So just trying to line up those times. It's been tough. I would say not the time zone hasn't been tough. I think we can find the time zone out. It's just like we send an email and then we don't get a response for like 2 days. So it's trying to just stay on top of it and get everything scheduled has been the slowest part for us there.
Okay, let me stop here for a while. And is there any other team who had the same issue with timely responses, and how did you solve that? No? Okay. Now, so Jared, are you the site contact for UNCC?
No, it's Salah has been doing most of the conversations with our contacts there.
Okay, so I would suggest maybe you two could share your instant messaging app. So whatever you use, could be cell phone, could be WeChat, could be WhatsApp or anything. So if there's no response for email, you could send the instant message to the contest and ask them to respond within, say, 24 hours. That would help.
We asked for their group me, and they didn't respond to that either, but we can ask again. I think that wouldn't hurt.
I provided my phone number too for WhatsApp if they prefer to just send me a message on WhatsApp, but they did not reach out or they did not share their phone numbers back. So
okay, yeah. So maybe WhatsApp is blocked in China. So I don't know if you guys use WeChat. So WeChat is very popular in China. So if you can get a WeChat, that would help a lot. Because WeChat is like attached to their phone.
I'll download WeChat and we'll send them another email and see if that'll work better. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah. So what have you learned? What have you done? What have you learned last week?
Yeah. So the next point would be we discussed and kind of decompressed what our the manager of Pro-Human Technologies told us. He gave us a lot of good information last week. So it kind of didn't turn us in a different direction, but definitely gave us a lot more to think about with all the information that he gave us. So there's definitely a lot, like a different angle kind of now that we've kind of talked to him and we've discussed that with him. So we've started to clean up our questions to ask our local partners, business partners, and get those together and started kind of outlining those questions so we can ask them when we do talk to them. And then also started to kind of outline our presentation as well.
Okay, great. So have they done any research so far, or that would be your next week's task?
They did some. So after the first meeting, the first girl got back to us and gave us some. She said that she actually talked with one of her good friends about our product to see what her friend would thought, and they gave us some good feedback about kind of one of the things they said was that when people are injured, like her mom was injured, they don't like to kind of go out in public. They don't like to be seen as injured. And I don't know if that's China or just kind of her thought, but her mom was injured and didn't like to be seen out in public injured. So like she just stayed in her house for weeks at a time. So that was kind of some good feedback that we got there. And then also when she was talking to her friend, she said her friend was talking about like yes and how it would be used and kind of how more people are getting more athletic in China and things like that. So a little bit of feedback, but nothing concrete quite yet.
Okay, gotcha. Great. All right, so perfect. Any concerns you have so far? Everything goes very well.
I don't have any concerns yet. Anybody else in my team have any concerns?
No, I think when we first talked to them, they were concerned that there wasn't a market for the product in China. Like Jared said, she talked about her mom not wanting to seek help, like maybe there was a pride connection to that. But then we thought that could maybe work in favor of our product because it's something you could use at home.
Yeah. Well, one suggestion for you is you really don't want to rely on one sample, one person at the sample size, right? His or her mom. So along the way, you want them to talk to more people, or send out a survey, or do some desk research online. So that's one suggestion. You want to make sure your sample, the data, the sample where you collect your data is representative to the target market for this product. It can be just one or two people. All right. So since we have Prohuman Technology Team China, why not the other Human Technology team also share your updates? So we have Human Technology Germany. Brianna, Melanie, Whitley. So any updates?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I can start off. I guess the biggest thing that we learned is that they're not as far along the process as we thought they were. And so with there not being a prototype, it kind of changed the way we thought a little bit. After meeting with him, we realized that he's still trying to get information about the product to see, how to make it better. And in figuring out his target market, there's two ways that he could go. It could be direct to consumer, or they could do more data and testing to hopefully get it, approved to the FDA. But of course, that would be a longer process. But that kind of changes how we see the product and which direction we're going to move. As far as working with our teammates in Germany, it's going well. We're currently gathering questions to complete a survey. I know Melanie is gathering that for everyone. And hopefully we can start sending that out within the next week and a half.
Okay, so one question about the survey. So how do you make sure the sampling is correct, or is representative for your target customer set? Because you have the characteristics for customer segments, right? How do you make sure the sampling of your survey respondents would well capture those characteristics?
Well, one of the suggestions that I thought of to get kind of a wide range was for each of us to put it on our LinkedIn profile and ask people to fill it out and to send to friends. So I know I've got a lot of global contacts, some of which are in Germany. And so that was to see what kind of responses we would get back and then be able to refine from there. Okay.
Now, because I wasn't in the meeting with you and the founder of Prohuman Technologies, so did you ask him about what kind of users would fall into his ideal target?
He said he's still trying to figure out the ideal consumer. but he did pinpoint athletes and military service men and women.
Okay, great. So if the ideal target would be athletes and military men and women, does it make sense for you to sample your respondents from that group of people?
Because he made it seem like he wasn't sure that was the right one. We also were looking at some of the things we used in our analysis, so other groups of people that might be interested in the product. So we even thought of like the older generation that might have issues with their legs, people who've just been injured. So trying to get a feel for if that actually is the target market that he's looking for.
Okay. Okay. Now I would suggest that you find somewhere in between a narrow definition of target that's just the athletes and military men and women, and then the very broad one of everybody. So I would think about one or two sources where you can get the most likely users of this product. For example, you could target hospitals where they receive a lot of injured patients, and we don't have to know the occupation, right? It could be athletes, it could be sports club members, it could be military men and women, it could be just ordinary people, right? So that's one idea, but you want to think about the representation of your sampling before you start executing the sampling. And that could be part of the conversation you should have with your foreign teammates. That what do they think? What do they observe as the typical users in their country?
Well, and we had also discussed speaking with physical therapists as well.
Exactly. All right. So I have to move to another team, but I hope I have given you some ideas to think about for your next week. Why don't we move to better exchange? So any updates? Jared, Brandon? No, yes. Jared, Brandon, Mohammed, any updates?
Yeah, so we met with the team Thursday morning. Really just spent the time discussing who they are, more about cultural, just understanding each other, what their experience is. They talked about really an internship where they're working 19 hours with no pay and stuff like that. It was kind of wild. High level, we got into what the product is, battery sharing and power bank sharing and stuff like that. And they said, oh, they're familiar with it. They'll go do some research and pull some stuff together for our next meeting. From meeting with the owner / founder, that was really insightful overall. We got a lot of information back around just where they plan on going and what's been some of their hiccups, especially with COVID and it being something where you need people to be touching the same product. But as things open back up, they're very excited about future opportunities.
Okay. Now, have you talked to your teammates about any potential division of labor or division of work?
Right now, with it being just two of them, we haven't went in depth through what we need to have broken out. We just really talked about high level. Hey, just grab some market research. Have you used it? Have you touched it? Have you played with it? And then come back with what you know. We kind of went through the presentation that we put together for this class, just kind of talking through the different components, what the product is, and what the goal of the project is.
Okay.
And they kind of took all of that, saying, "Okay, we understand. We'll pull something together, and then we can talk about next steps next week."
Okay, perfect. Okay, good. Were there any concerns that you hope I or the class can help you with? Or everything goes well?
Not at the moment, Brendan or Mohammed. You got anything? Nothing really pops up around concerns right now.
Not really. I mean, I would say probably the biggest concern is time differences because, like Gerald said, he's also doing an internship on the side, but we're like figuring our way around that though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So time zone is always the major barrier, especially for working people. I believe you also have the. So are you working with the undergrad or MBA students in your from China?
MBAs.
The MBAs?
Yeah.
Okay, so they probably also have interns or even full-time jobs. So that could be a concern. But that's perfect. That's the kind of simulation you want. right? Because that would imitate perfectly the kind of global business environment you will have in a real job. So that's the kind. Those are good problems. Those are problems you want to have in your experience. All right, great. So next thing, AI for EPM. Any updates?
I can go. Yeah, we have quite a few updates. So we took all of the notes, recommendations you provided in the last meeting. So we kind of broke that out amongst our team here. While we were doing that, because there's still some work we need to do on just investigating the value proposition for the top. We picked the top 5 EPM companies here in the US as a starting point. And then we're also fine-tuning the BMC with the value propositions, because as you had mentioned, we don't want it to be like about the system features. We wanted to see how valuable it is to the consumers. And then we also, I know Abdul also updated some of the links to some of our sources. And we also send over the report, the week 3 report to our Chinese teammates. And we've also asked them to start thinking about some of the field research questions, start looking at section 2. And then in our next meeting, we would, that's the piece that we want to focus on in our next meeting on Friday. So we found that their sweet spot as far as timing of the meeting is on Friday mornings at 8 a.m. our time, which is about 8 p.m. their time. So that works out, I think, for all of us. If we do it ahead of time, I think it works out well. So that's our next meeting. So during that meeting, we want to look at the field research questions. We want to have the Excel sheet where we have the top 5 EPM companies for the US. And then also we want to investigate whether the same company is also there in China, if there's a presence there, and what the value proposition is for China. So we have like an Excel sheet with all those different questions, and we're trying to populate as much of that before we meet with them on Friday, so we give them more information.
Okay, great. Were there any concerns so far? Well, by concern, I really mean difficulties or challenges.
Well, I was having a little problem, and it's taking me longer to pull like the top. I was able to pull the top 5 EPM vendors or EPM companies, but trying to get really like a succinct value proposition for each, it's been a little bit time. Yeah. And I did look at that site that you had mentioned. I can't remember the name of it right now, but we're still working through that as a team. So I don't know if the rest of the group, Abdul or Janessa, has any other feedback.
Yeah, I think you mentioned about the Gartner, right? Collecting the information on Gartner was not easy. So, Professor, have any feedback on? You mentioned about we can find some information on the Gartner, but you have any like pointers there or where to look, or is just searching on the Gartner, whatever comes is what we refer, or you mentioned that.
So you're asking the value propositions of those top 5 players.
Yeah.
So there won't be any single source of website where people have done this for you, right? So the best place is to go to the customer-facing website of those companies, especially where they demonstrate their products or platforms, solutions for EPM. So because when they market to the customers, it's a pretty normal practice to market the value propositions. That's where they would specifically talk about value propositions.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Great. Thank you. Light and charge. Zane, Joe, Crystal, any updates?
Yes, we have been meeting now. We have met 3 times with our Chinese partners, and the meetings were all good. We started, the first one was purely just to get to know each other. We just talked a little bit about what we do, and they talked about what they do. Second meeting, we already, and in between, we already emailed them some materials so that they can do pre-studies before our meeting. They started, after our second meeting, they dived right in and came back with list of companies that we should talk with. And we had our third meeting yesterday, actually. And so the next steps are that we have agreed that they will start approaching. We identified 4 target companies to approach with our questions that we developed in our weekly report number 3. And we did talk about how we divide the work, and they felt that they have a better position in contacting companies just because of the language, and also they are in the same time zone. And Joey from our team, like, he offered that he could be available also on all times. Of course, depends on what the times are, that maybe also participate and support with more knowledge.
Okay, and also I know you were not in class. That the CEO of the company didn't come to the class, so you had a separate meeting outside class. How did that go?
Yeah. Yes. It was really, like for me, it was really eye-opening because we had some questions before, but meeting with Margaret, like, she was really straightforward and shared lots of information, so it helped me to connect some knots. But I can also let my colleagues to talk, but I think it was helpful.
Yeah, I thought it was helpful as well. She answered a lot of our questions and gave us a clear idea of her product and what she's looking to get from partners and customers in China. So it was definitely helpful. I think the only question that we had after discussing yesterday was around the amount of interviews that we should conduct. I think we thought that you had said something about 20 interviews total. Yeah, is that 20. Still okay?
So just to clarify, 20 interviews means 20 interviews throughout the semester for the entire team, right? So it's up to you to have a discussion with your foreign teammates on how to execute interviews. Number one, not all the questions would require an interview to answer. So if you can collect a lot of objective, reliable data through desk research, that would be perfect, right? And I would suggest that would be the focus of your first or second weeks of your work with your foreign teammates. So let's collect all the data we need, so we know what would be the remaining questions for which we need to design surveys or interviews to talk to people. Because interviews are difficult to execute for several reasons. One is you guys know better about the project, but you don't speak the language to reach out to people. So you need to engage the foreign teammates as your agents to conduct interviews. Number two, although 20 is the minimum, you could go much higher if you have time. If you have enough people, you could go up to 40 or 50. I believe Margaret of your team conducted 100 interviews by herself last year. So, but even so, that's not gonna be perfectly representative about your customer, right? Because if there's a micro level statistics out there, it's better than talking to 10, 20, 30 different people. And also, it's up to you how you divide your work in those interviews. Now, some of the partners I talked with, they would also like to see some interview data about American users, right? So you could have 10 user interviews in the US, 10 user interviews in China, in Germany, and make a comparison, do some comparative analysis. Or it could be 20 entirely from China, from Germany, and ask if your local teammates can do all the interviews independently. So it's all up to you. I'm very flexible, but for questions you cannot answer through desk reviews, interviews would be the best way, given that you have local contexts. But it's difficult to do. 20 would be minimum, It's because you won't get the representation and the sampling unbiasedness in 20 interviews, but that's minimum. If you can go higher, always better. Because in the end, you have to put together a pitch video, send it back to your business partners, right? So, and the good thing is those partners understand very well the business model canvas. They have taken the National Science Foundation IQOPS program themselves, so they know the language. They know how to interpret business model canvas. They know what is hypothesis, what is hypothesis testing. They have done their own interviews, so they know the process, and so they, in other words, they know how to evaluate how well you have done, how hard you have worked on the field work. All right, we have 2 to 3 more minutes. Any other questions about the coming week? No? All right, looks like we are good. We're good to go. So good luck, everyone. The fun part has just started. Now, because I know German culture so well, I know Chinese Asian culture so well. In your first 1 and 2 weeks, they probably haven't gotten out of their shell yet. So they tend to be shy, to be polite. They try not to be so proactive, and they need some time to warm up in their own teams. So it's just their 2nd or 3rd week of team building on the other side. But this week could be the tipping point. You will see they will become a lot more proactive and a lot more personable, a lot more outspoken, open-minded. So good luck, everyone. I can't wait to see your next bi-weekly report, and let's talk more next week, next Monday. All right, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.